NBIA, Natural Bioscience Intelligence Agency. The science is real. The mission is yours.
I'm on the loading dock. Plant-based shake line, Neurabal complete meal. Shipping to 12,000 addresses this week. Ingredient 7 is listed as natural red seaweed extract. That's carrageenan steel, listed as natural, positioned for weight management.
Confirmed. It's not alone. Same compound appears in leading plant-based protein shakes, dairy alternative blends, organic meal replacement lines, several infant formula brands, and every major cottage cheese line carrying a clean ingredients badge. The mechanism is identical across all of them. They all use it for mouthfeel.
They're selling satiety. It's destroying the signal that creates it.
Biochemistry is indifferent to opinion, Viper. The hypothalamus doesn't read the label. There is a countermeasure. It's specific. It's studied. You'll have it before this episode ends. 18 hours earlier, Geneva.
30 years of weight management cohort data, specifically the subgroup that failed every caloric restriction intervention despite full dietary compliance. No cheat days confirmed. No caloric surplus. Perfect protocol adherence. Weight did not move. The original study design never isolated carrageenan as a variable. I've just run the overlay. The correlation is significant. The non-responders show consistent emulsifier consumption across the study period. The mechanism wasn't calories, it was the signal. I'm joining the briefing. They need to understand what 30 years of willpower failure actually looked like.
Operation Phantom Hunger. The target, carrageenan, a sulfated polysaccharide extracted from red seaweed, deployed in the food supply as a thickener and emulsifier across dairy alternatives, infant formula, deli meats, protein shakes, and clean label meal replacements. The Formulator has embedded it at scale in a weight loss product. Ghost your findings from Pennington.
The non-responder cohort. Adults who followed every protocol correctly and still couldn't lose weight. The common variable we never isolated. Dietary emulsifier consumption, specifically carrageenan present in the clean products they trusted most. 30 years. The data was there. The question was never asked.
Here is the mechanism, but first the frame. Think of leptin as a text message your stomach sends your brain when you've had enough food, and think of your hypothalamus as the phone receiving it. What carrageenan does through a chain of molecular events is damage the phone's signal receiver. The message is sent. The brain simply can't read it with full fidelity. The phone shows 1 bar instead of 5. The person eats again. They blame themselves. Here is the mechanism. Carrageenan degrades in the acidic stomach environment into poligeenan, a low molecular weight fragment. Poligeenan crosses the intestinal lining and activates TLR4 receptors on intestinal macrophages. TLR4 is a pathogen recognition receptor. It responds to carrageenan the same way it responds to bacterial lipopolysaccharides. The result is NF-kappa B pathway activation, the master switch of systemic inflammation.
If TLR4 is a pathogen receptor, why does it fire on a food ingredient?
Because the sulfated structure of poligeenan mimics lipopolysaccharide at the molecular recognition level. The receptor cannot distinguish between a bacterial endotoxin and a degraded food polymer with equivalent charge density. The immune response is identical. The inflammation is real. And the collateral damage reaches the hypothalamus, where chronic TLR4-driven NF-kappa B signaling degrades leptin receptor expression and downstream STAT3 signaling. The satiety signal is transmitted. The receptor is compromised. The brain does not register the meal with full fidelity. The consumer is hungry again in 90 minutes. They do not know why. The Formulator sales data shows a 340% repeat purchase rate above category average for this SKU. He calls it retention.
While they call it willpower failure.
Ghost population trajectory.
If you engineer hypothalamic leptin resistance through a compound delivered in a weight loss product, specifically in the demographic most motivated to comply, you have created a closed loop. The product causes the hunger that requires the product. The longer the exposure, the greater the receptor degradation. The clinical literature on leptin resistance indicates partial restoration is possible, but the window narrows with duration. The damage is cumulative and quiet.
Countermeasure.
Berberine, an isoquinoline alkaloid, the most studied natural activator of AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase. The cellular energy sensor that directly sensitizes hypothalamic leptin receptors. It operates on 3 parallel tracks. First, it activates AMPK in hypothalamic arcuate nucleus neurons, restoring leptin receptor expression, and STAT3, signaling the pathway that registers satiety. Second, it inhibits NF-kappa B activation downstream of TLR4 stimulation, interrupting the inflammatory cascade that carrageenan initiates. Third, it modulates the gut microbiome by selectively suppressing gram-negative bacteria that amplify LPS-mediated TLR4 signaling.
One compound does all 3 simultaneously.
It operates on parallel pathways that are mechanistically linked. AMPK activation reduces NF-kappa B activity. These are not coincidental effects. The anti-inflammatory action and the leptin receptor restoration are downstream of the same upstream event. Berberine targets the root cause, not the symptom.
Viper. Isfahan. Go.
14 hours later, Isfahan, Iran. Isfahan. Iran produces 90% of the world's barberry, Berberis vulgaris. This plant has been cultivated here for over 2,000 years for medicinal use. The root bark commands its own section in the market. I'm looking at the source of the countermeasure. The Formulator had every reason to ignore.
Because it cannot be patented. Barberry was in the public domain long before IP law existed. No exclusivity, no incentive to fund large trials. Someone funded them anyway. Berberine content in this root bark ranges from 2 to 8% by dry weight, depending on harvest timing and processing method. The standardized 97% berberine HCl extract used in clinical trials is not achievable from whole root bark alone. But the origin plant tells you something. This compound was identified as therapeutically significant before the mechanism was understood.
Whole root bark versus standardized extract sourcing matters.
The clinical evidence is built on the extract. That distinction is not academic.
N. 3 bioavailability ceiling for oral berberine at standard dosing. Efflux mechanism.
Oral bioavailability, approximately 5% due to P-glycoprotein and BCRP efflux transporter activity at the intestinal epithelium. Co-administration with silymarin or piperine inhibits these efflux transporters, increasing plasma concentration 3-fold. Portal distribution to hepatic, intestinal, and hypothalamic tissue occurs within 2 to 4 hours post-ingestion. Divided dosing maintains therapeutic plasma levels throughout waking hours. Single large dose does not.
Berberine, a small positively charged alkaloid, absorbed in the upper small intestine via epithelial transport proteins. Bioavailability modest at 5%. Efflux transporters work against it. Co-administered with silymarin or piperine, those transporters are inhibited. Plasma concentration increases 3-fold. The molecule reaches portal circulation 2 to 4 hours post-ingestion. Berberine distributes to hepatic, intestinal, and hypothalamic tissue. It arrives at the arcuate nucleus, the satiety center. Hypothalamic neurons compromised by carrageenan-driven inflammation. Leptin receptors sparse on their surface. Berberine binds AMPK allosterically. AMP, ATP ratio perception shifts. AMPK phosphorylation is triggered. And here is the critical event. Activated AMPK upregulates leptin receptor expression on the neuronal surface. The receptor population increases. JAK2, STAT3, signaling the pathway that translates leptin binding into satiety, is potentiated. The satiety signal the body has been transmitting arrives with greater fidelity. The hypothalamus registers the meal, the phantom hunger quiets. For the first time in months, the consumer stops eating before the bag is empty and does not understand why today is different from yesterday. The shake is the same, they are not.
Field report closed, root bark provenance documented, standardized extract sourcing distinction logged. The consumer gets the mechanism and the dose. The formulator loses the closed loop.
The loop doesn't close if the signal gets through.
Cortisol spike confirmed at 47 minutes post-ingestion. The adrenal response is dose-dependent and cumulative. Consumer, attributes it to work stress, expanding the energy drink formulation into the pre-workout category. The 18 to 34 male demographic presents maximum adrenal sensitivity and minimum awareness of the mechanism.
He's already moved. Energy drinks. Pre-workout. New demographic. Next operation has already begun.
The non-responder data from Pennington is formally flagged. Carrageenan exposure as a dietary variable will be included in future cohort study design requests. 30 years late, but the question is now on record.
The Formulator is 3 moves ahead, but every move he makes produces a biochemical trail. We follow the molecule. Ghost begin preliminary intelligence on adrenal pathway modulation via dietary stimulant compounds. Pre-workout category. Next operation authorized.
Understood.
Everything you're about to hear has been published in peer-reviewed research. I'm going to give you the mechanism, the study, and the exact dose in plain language. Berberine is an isoquinoline alkaloid found in the root bark of Berberis, vulgaris, Barberi, and Incoptis chinensis. Its primary action, relevant to appetite regulation, is AMPK activation in hypothalamic neurons. AMPK is the cellular energy sensor. When berberine activates it, 2 things happen in sequence. Leptin receptor expression increases on the neuronal surface, and JAK2, STAT3 signaling the pathway that translates leptin into the satiety signal is potentiated. In a gut compromised by carrageenan-driven TLR4 inflammation, berberine also inhibits NF-kappa B activation downstream of TLR4 stimulation, reducing the inflammatory signal that was degrading receptor sensitivity in the first place. Dong and colleagues, 2012. Journal of Ethnopharmacology, Volume 144, Issue 1, a meta-analysis of 14 randomized controlled trials. Berberine supplementation produced statistically significant reductions in body weight, a mean reduction of 2.24 kilograms versus control, along with reductions in BMI and waist circumference, and simultaneous improvements in fasting, glucose, and lipid profiles. The authors note these outcomes are mechanistically consistent with restored hypothalamic AMPK activity and leptin receptor sensitization, not simply with caloric restriction. Therapeutic range, 500 milligrams berberine HCl, 3 times daily with meals. Total, 1,500 milligrams per day. The detail the industry doesn't want you to know, berberine has a plasma half-life of approximately 4 hours. That means a single morning dose of 1,500 milligrams produces therapeutic plasma concentrations for roughly 4 hours and sub-therapeutic concentrations for the remaining 20. 3 divided doses maintain coverage across the day. Most supplement labels suggest 1 or 2 capsules daily. That dosing schedule leaves the mechanism unsupported for 16 of every 24 hours. Consistency across the day, not a single morning dose. NBIA. Truth and transparency in human health.